All right. Hey, everybody. We are live. Chuck Holton here coming to you from my place in West Virginia. And I've got three, four grandbabies here right now. So this might be a short live. I didn't do a live yesterday because I was spending time with the grandbabies, and that just, I don't get a chance to do that very often. So I'm sorry if I didn't come on live. Although, if you haven't seen the video that I did with Matt Tardio, I did an interview with him and put that up yesterday, and it's really excellent. And you definitely should go watch that if you haven't had a chance to. But I highly recommend you go ahead and do that. Do me a favor and hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. And while you're at it, go to the chat bar here and tell me where you're watching from. I see Denise is coming from Soggy, North Georgia. You talk about soggy. It has been ridiculously rainy here in West Virginia. Or actually, you might hear the lawnmower going because we've had about 15 minutes of sun, and it's the first time in several days that we've had any sun. So we're rushing around trying to get lawns mowed and things like that. Leora is watching from Israel. David from Zimbabwe. Wow, West Texas, New York, Georgia, Long Island. Yeah, it's been a pretty wet spring, and I guess we need it. But man, I'm gonna have to cut hay off of my front yard if it doesn't quit raining long enough for me to mow out here. So where are the women and children? All I see are military age men coming to get the aid. Uh, well, they probably aren't going to send children to come get the aid, and we're going to be talking about that on today's live. Just how much of a scam this is. I talked about it on the day before yesterday, talking about the the fact that this whole aid scheme that Israel is engaging in here is really kind of more political theater than anything. However, it has turned out to be fairly effective, actually, a lot more effective than any aid program that the UN was putting out, at least in the places where they have distribution points. And surprisingly enough, there have been a lot of videos coming out on social media of Palestinians being grateful, even recording thank yous to President Trump. Although I'm not sure exactly how much President Trump had to do with all this, but suffice it to say, this is a plan that the IDF came up with and is being executed by an American company, an American contractor firm, the same one that did the security when they were allowing Gazans to come back north after the ceasefire began back in February. So, on another note, just as a quick mention, a very sad note this morning, the little baby. If you recall, a week or two ago, there was a Israeli family that was ambushed on their way to the hospital as the mother was about to give birth, and the mother was killed in the gunfire. The father was wounded, and they were able to deliver the baby via C-section, and the baby survived. And unfortunately, the baby, the newborn, uh, his name was Chaim. Ravid Haim. He died yesterday, and his funeral is happening as we speak. Very sad news out of Israel. And, think about it. These people, they were just living their lives. You know, they just want to be able to go have their baby. And that, just like the shooting last week in Washington, D.C., of this young couple, eh, I mean, it's just so senseless, isn't it? It just makes you sick. Speaking of making me sick, Byron Perry saying have more children is not cool. That guy needs to go. So yeah, very sad day for that family. That you imagine that father is now bereft of his wife and new baby. Just terrible. And for what? For what? What kind of point does that prove other than that Palestinians are barbarians, really? Right? So on that note, I wanted to show, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show this to you because I kind of ran out of time here. Let's see if I can do this while I'm talking. But there was a um, meeting at the United Nations that happened. Let's see. Let's go here. Yeah, we'll go this one. Okay. There was a meeting that happened at the United Nations, and there was a interchange between the United Nations representative of the quote unquote state of Palestine. This kind of a ridiculous thing that they have done, but this representative of the state of Palestine spent his time to speak before the assembly bashing Israel and saying Israel is murdering children. And then he actually broke down in tears and just big crocodile tears. And look, it is super sad that babies are dying in Gaza. Now, I think that Dannon, the Israeli representative to the UN, had a very good response, a very diplomatic response, a very actually kind response, much kinder than mine would have been. I would have just leaned forward to the microphone and said, how about try releasing the hostages? Have you tried releasing the hostages? And just leave it at that. But I want to play a little bit of what the state of Palestine representative said. And then I'm going to show you Dannon's response, which was pretty awesome. Okay, so let's see if I can make this work here. Transition.
Since Israel broke the ceasefire in March, over 1,300 Palestinian children have been killed and around 4,000 have been injured. These are children. Children. And still, a war against barbarism. Children.
I'm going to fast forward to the point where he's breaking down.
Apologize. How could anyone?
So here he's getting all emotional. So emotional for those babies that are dying in Palestine.
Excuse me,
or
Mr.
in
President.
Gaza.
I have grandchildren. I know what they mean to their families. And to see the situation of the Palestinians without us having hearts to do.
Now, this guy obviously making a very heartfelt case that this is terrible, what Israel is doing, how horrible they are, how could they do this? Again, to which you could just reply, have you tried releasing the hostages? But I want to see if I've got Dannon's thing teed up here. Let's see if I can find that. Let's see here.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mansour, you mentioned our Prime Minister many times in your speech, your long speech. I want to remind you the words of our former Prime Minister, Golda Meir, who served 50 years ago in this position. And she said that peace will come when you will love your children more than you hate us. Mr. President.
So, very diplomatic response there, just reminding him of the words of Golda Meir that the war will stop when the Palestinians love their children more than they hate us. Us being the Israelis. Powerful, powerful stuff. It's a good reminder. And we've had more and more reminders over the past 24 or 48 hours as this new IDF food distribution plan has gone into effect. At first, it was utter chaos. Hamas has been setting up checkpoints in Gaza to stop people from going to the distribution sites. But the people have broken through those checkpoints and gone and got the aid anyway. So when they showed up, they had, at the first one that they opened, they had 60,000 people show up at this aid distribution point. And at some point, somebody just said, you know what? These American contractors are not going to shoot us. And so they just broke through the gates and just picked the place clean. It was just absolute chaos. The Americans shot in the air a little bit, but obviously nobody got shot, nobody got killed. And they sort of stole all the aid. But they've improved security and they've managed to kind of get it a little more organized now. And they are delivering well over 1 million meals a day now through this new IDF system, which is pretty amazing considering there's only like 4 aid stations where they're passing out this aid. But here's what's happening to that. So I've shown you in the past videos of the marketplaces inside Gaza, full of food and vegetables and everything for sale. And of course, the Gazans complain that it's being sold at exorbitant prices. And if you look real closely at that food, it's aid that was looted from aid trucks. It was supposed to be given to the people, and then it's being sold to the people in the market. Now, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that if somebody's in the market selling obviously stolen food, then it wouldn't be a moral wrong to steal it from them. But at any rate, they've had this black market going on for the entirety of the war where they're selling this aid at inflated prices. Well, it's much harder for them to do that now because the IDF is distributing the aid directly to the people. And without a doubt, I'm sure that Hamas is going around to families and taking that aid and trying to sell it, but they can't get it from everybody. If they pass out 1.3 million meals today, these are in boxes, so it's not 1.3 million boxes. It's I think there's 40 meals in a box or something like that, and they're passing them out one per family. But there's still tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that are receiving these boxes. So Hamas really can't go collect them all up from everybody. And the net effect of that is that the prices of the food that's in the market are plummeting because if they can get food for free from the IDF, why would they go pay inflated prices in the market for it? And so that food in the market is going to go bad if they don't get rid of it. And the merchants are realizing, the Hamas merchants are realizing, oh, shoot, we're not going to be able to get anything for this. It's going to be worthless in a few days if we don't sell it. So they're selling it lower and lower and lower prices. This is fantastic. Now, this happens, this isn't just economics 101. Actually, I've seen this happen many times in Haiti and Africa and different places like that. In Haiti, if you have a like 1 hour, I'm sorry, 1 hour, if you have one season of crops that fail because of a drought or something, and so now there's no food in Haiti, and the world body kind of goes, hey, we got to get some food to Haiti to feed these people. They're going hungry. And so they get their act together and they get a ship and they fill it full of grain or rice or something in the United States and they bring it down to Haiti. Well, it's going to take a few weeks to a month for that process to happen before they can actually get some food there. And Haiti has a year-round growing season. So by then, the farmers have planted again, and now they have a actual viable crop that they're getting ready to harvest to bring to market. Only problem is when they get ready to harvest, bring to market, there's nobody to buy because this ship full of food showed up in the harbor of Port-au-Prince and they're giving away food over there. So why would you buy food from a local farmer when you can get it for free off the ship? So what happens is the farmers go under, they go broke, and they go get in line for the free food as well. And that's one of the ways that aid perpetuates the cycle of dependency in a place like Haiti. However, in a place like Gaza, Israel is now figuring out that they can weaponize this phenomenon against Hamas. So they're allowing the Gazans to get dependent for a time on IDF supplied free food. And what that's doing is it's reducing Hamas' stranglehold on the people because Hamas kept that stranglehold on the people largely by being the hand that fed the people through the United Nations and other NGOs. So the World Food Program came in and brought food in. They didn't set up a distribution site and just hand it out to the people. They handed it over to Hamas, and Hamas distributed it to the people that they wanted to have it. How do we know this? Well, yesterday, there's amazing videos coming out on social media of this huge WFP warehouse, World Food Program warehouse in Gaza, and the Palestinians broke into it, and it was filled to the rafters with flour and oil and rice and wheat and everything. There were just millions of meals, I mean, hundreds of tons of food in this warehouse. And the Palestinians just looted the whole thing and ran off with it. Now, I want to show you a video of what happened in the aftermath of that. This is not it.
Thank you, Mr. President.
No, not that one. Not that one. There we go. You can hear gunfire. This is people running away with the aid they stole out of that World Food Program warehouse, and Hamas is shooting at them. At least 4 people were killed, probably more, and more people wounded by Hamas. Why? Because that was not a World Food Program warehouse. World Food Program paid for it, but Hamas ran it. And those people were stealing from Hamas. So they're obviously getting more brazen, more bold as they realize that Hamas is losing its grip over the people. But you can hear all this gunfire going on. Now, these are pretty grainy images, but as I look at these people, I can tell that there's not, I mean, they don't look like they're starving to death. They may be hungry, but they're not starving. So that gives you an idea of it's just what this is doing. This IDF plan to distribute aid directly to the people may actually be very effective, not so much in terms of hastening an end to the war, getting Hamas out, perhaps. What I'm starting to see is that the IDF is weaponizing this aid against Hamas. So they're turning the tables on Hamas in a way that is actually very clever. if the people start to understand that they can get food directly from the IDF and there's nothing Hamas can do to stop them, well then in a hopeful world, you could say that people from the Palestinians may be more likely to turn on Hamas and maybe even turn them in. But that remains to be seen. And if past is prologue, the Palestinians, if there was a vote in Gaza today, Hamas would still win. There are enough Palestinians who are still very pro Hamas, very anti Israel, that Hamas is still able to maintain control. But that area of control is getting whittled down more and more. So the Israelis have taken more than 50% of Gaza now. They hold it. They are occupying it. They're not doing what they did before where they pass through and clear it and then leave and let the people come back in. And their plan is to take between 75% and 100% of Gaza, depending on how they're just going to keep taking ground until Hamas capitulates or is completely unable to govern or fight anymore. Now, this is going to take time, and they should have done this at the beginning. It's like we learned this lesson in Somalia and Haiti and some of these little brush fire wars. I'm trying to think you know, Vietnam actually was where we learned the lesson that you can't go in. If the enemy has 100,000 troops, you can't send 100,000 troops to meet them. Even if American troops are better trained, better led, better equipped, better motivated, better paid, everything, and they're much better soldiers, and they could defeat 100,000 of the enemy. It doesn't make sense to make it an even fight. What makes sense is to send 700,000 or 800,000 troops against the enemy's 100,000 and absolutely crush them in a maneuver that in the first Gulf War was called shock and awe. You remember shock and awe? You remember President Bush, going into Baghdad at the beginning, 2003, and just hammering Baghdad, overkill, without a doubt. Well, that was what helped us to topple the regime very quickly. It worked very well. We learned that lesson after Vietnam, and we learned it again, even worse, in Somalia. We sent a company of Rangers to go up against, maybe 1 million Somalis. And we won that battle, but we lost about 19 guys doing it. So we didn't have air support. President Clinton wouldn't give them the military support they needed to do those missions. And so they were going in essentially with one hand tied behind their back. That led to the Black Hawk Down incident. So we should have learned those lessons and learned that if you're going to go kinetic against an adversary, don't do it. Half measures are a very bad idea. You've got to go all in. You got to put everything you have into it and absolutely crush the enemy. And there's a Sunday school lesson in that I could get off topic on, but bottom line is, we need to do that in our own lives as well. If you've got a problem facing you, and you really want to fix this problem, you need to be willing to pull out all the stops and do whatever it takes to fix that problem. And I learned that in the military, and it's served me very well in my own life since then. But now the United Nations after World War II, and they've been pushing this doctrine of proportionality. That well, it's just you. If they kill 10 of your people, then you kill 10 of their people. If they attack you with a platoon, then you attack them with a platoon. And that, my friends, is a recipe for total war forever until somebody runs out of money. Usually us. Usually the ones who are spending the most money. That would be us. So the Israelis are now at the point where they're like, okay, we're pulling out all the stops. They've got more troops in Gaza than they've ever had. They're in more areas of Gaza than they've ever been. And they are ramping up the pressure on not just Gaza, but on Yemen and Iran and Hezbollah. You know, the strikes that have continued in Lebanon, the IDF is hitting targets every day in Lebanon. That war has never stopped. They have this ceasefire. It was a ceasefire agreed to between the United States and the Lebanese government. It has nothing to do with Hezbollah. But the IDF has been continuing to strike Hezbollah targets every single day since that ceasefire came into effect. So Israel is realizing, okay, we're going to have to go hard against these people. And I'm just like, oh, why didn't you do that at the beginning? This would have been over a long time ago. At the beginning of the war, when Israel was ramping up, they had 700,000 people go to recruiting centers in Israel and apply to become soldiers. They didn't have space for them. They didn't have weapons for them. They weren't prepared for that many people. They had 3 times as many people as they had weapons that were, they had to get their act together. But they could have easily ramped it up within a few months to the point where they could have, maybe not as organized, but they could have gone in and gone very hard against Gaza. And maybe they were concerned that if they did that, that Hezbollah would open up the new front. They would attack from the north, because this is before Operation Grim Beeper. Well, once Operation Grim Beeper took place and Hezbollah was effectively out of the picture, that would have been the perfect time for Israel to go, okay, turn it up to 11 in Gaza and let's get this thing over with. We need a full court press, militarily, economically, aid-wise, and politically. Now, at that same United Nations meeting, the United States representative to the UN, when she got her time to speak, she said, we support Israel and everything that they're doing, and they have every right to defend themselves. And she said all the right things. However, we're kind of speaking out of both sides of our mouths as Americans here, because we have Steve Witkoff in Qatar meeting with Hamas officials and putting backchannel pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to, allow aid into Gaza, when that aid blockade was actually working. And it could have worked faster if they'd shut off the water as well, but they didn't do that. So in some ways, the Trump administration is being a hindrance to the peace process by trying to straddle the fence, not near as much as the Biden administration did, but even just a little bit. I mean, they need to just be merciless. I hate to say it. They need to be merciless with Gaza until they get their hostages back. They just need to say, you're not getting anything. You're not going to have electricity, internet, water, food. If we could take the air out of Gaza, we would do it until we get our hostages back. And once we get our hostages back, then the floodgates will open. You have more aid than you'll know what to do with. None of it ought to come from Israel or the United States, but right now it is. And this is one thing that I am trying to figure out. How much US taxpayer money is going to feed people in Gaza right now? Because what we know is that the United Nations has refused to participate in this new aid scheme. They're not going to work with the Israelis. I mean, God forbid that the United Nations or the World Food Program or any of those guys work for, work to help people in Gaza through the Israelis. That's a bridge too far for the United Nations to actually cooperate with the Israelis. But they are going further than that. They're not even just themselves refusing to participate, but they're telling all of the other NGOs that work with the United Nations in any capacity, if you join the Israelis and help people in Gaza through them, we will blacklist you from ever working with the United Nations again. To which I would be like, hey, don't threaten me with a good time. But it just shows you the depths of depravity at UNHCR, the World Food Program, the United Nations. It's absolutely sickening. Yes, there are people who are dying in Gaza every day. Every single death is the fault of Hamas. It all lies at the feet of Hamas because there would be no fighting if Hamas would give up the hostages. Point, period, end of story. What is hard to understand about that? See, people are trying to blame Israel in a vacuum for the deaths and suffering that are happening in Gaza without taking into mind the concept or the context that there are still 20 living hostages being held. Yesterday was 600 days of war. 600 days. Now, in the aggregate, the Gazans have suffered more than the Israelis have. But from a moral standpoint, too bad. It's a sad thing that they have to suffer, and it is not Israel's fault. There's no way you can pin that on Israel. ESL says Israel would have gone all in much earlier, but for the condemnation from all other countries. Thank goodness that Trump has their backs. They couldn't have done this under Biden, that's for sure. Biden would have been. Can you imagine where the Biden administration or the Harris administration would be right now? What they would be doing to Israel if Israel would not have been able to do what they've done so far. And Denise says President Trump has held Israel back as well. Trump is so interested in doing a deal with Iran that he's not letting Israel strike. Well, there's a lot of truth to that, Denise. Can't disagree with you there. So it's nice to see the Trump administration supporting Israel more than the Biden administration did, but they could go a lot further in supporting Israel than they are. Now, I just wonder, I'd like your opinion. What do you think? How long do you think this war will go on? Do you think it'll be over this year? Do you think it'll go on longer than that? I would like to optimistically think that it could be over this year. But knowing what I know about wars always last longer, as my friend Michael Yon likes to say. Wars always grow, and wars always grow unpredictably, and they always last longer and cost more than you think they will. I would add another maxim to that list. Wars always cost the aggressor more than they cost those who are defending their country. We've seen that in Russia. We've seen that in Burma. We've seen it in Israel as well. So it looks like Israel is having some backchannel negotiations with the Syrian government under Ahmed al-Shara to kind of form up a deal where basically Syria would agree not to be a threat to Israel. And in return, Israel will stop bombing things in Syria uh, that HTS would like very much not to have bombed. And there's some conditions on both sides of that, but there's something hopeful happening there. And it's really cool to see how here we are, look, 600 days since the war started. Gaza has been all but leveled. Hezbollah has been diminished to the point where they are not a military threat, much of a military threat much longer to Israel. And I just wanted to end on a positive note here because um, even though Hezbollah just won elections in Lebanon, they were just reelected as a political party. As a military force right now, they're not that much of a threat to Israel. And there's more good news. Israel, because of this war, has dramatically ramped up its defenses against the 7 different adversaries it's facing to the point where they've accelerated programs like the Iron Beam program uh, that will enable them to shoot down drones and missiles with lasers that cost about $1 a shot rather than $50,000 a shot as it currently stands. They've expedited that process, and so now they're actually starting to deploy those lasers in the north. And we just found out yesterday that in fact, even during the fighting between Hezbollah and Israel, before that ceasefire, and Hezbollah was sending drones across into Israel on a daily basis, it turns out that many of those drones were actually shot down by the Iron Beam. Uh, they were testing it up there, and it was very effective. That Iron Beam is going to be an absolute game changer because not and worldwide, not just in Israel. This is another area where Israel is sort of on the cutting edge, and the technology that gets perfected in Israel ends up benefiting the whole world. Imagine the benefit to Ukraine if they could get a couple hundred or a couple thousand of these Iron Beam things, devices, and array them around Ukraine. I mean, a laser will travel obviously much faster even than a hypersonic missile. So theoretically, they could shoot down hypersonic missiles with these lasers. And if I was the United States, I would be getting a hold of those iron beams and shipping some of them to Ukraine to test them out on Russian missiles as soon as possible. One of the real benefits of the war in Ukraine is that it is benefits to the West is that it's been a laboratory for military technology, and it has really helped the United States to laser focus our spending in our defense department on things that matter and stop spending money on tanks because tanks are now obsolete, and even perhaps stop spending money on missiles because if this iron beam becomes uh, ubiquitous or even widely available to Western countries, that would all but decimate the main battle strategy of our adversaries, China, North Korea, Rocket Man, and Russia and Iran. Now, there was one more quote I wanted to play for you from Danny Dannon's speech where he talks directly to Iran and reiterates Israel's threat to act unilaterally against Iran. Okay, let's see if I can find this
To
one.
Iran's leaders, take this as a warning. Israel has shown restraint, but from here on, you will see only strength. Any further aggression will be met with consequences that are swift and decisive. And to the members of this Council, we call on you to act. Enough empty words. Enough statements of concern. The Iranian regime must face real consequences for its actions. We demand immediate and crippling sanctions targeting Iran's military and economic infrastructure. Designate the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization it is. Isolate Iran diplomatically, but most importantly, take the necessary measures to prevent a lunatic regime from attaining nuclear capabilities. Imagine who will sit here in a few years if, God forbid, they will have nuclear capabilities. The world cannot afford to ignore the threat Iran poses. This is no longer a matter of words, it is a matter of action.
Okay, so that was a absolutely fabulous speech that Denny Dannon gave. I would recommend that you go watch the entire thing. It's about 14 minutes long and worth every minute to watch if you're interested in Israel at all. I put it up over at chuckholton.com so you can go see it over there. You can get lots of extra content over at chuckholton.com. And I highly recommend that you go over there and subscribe and become a supporter. Toss me a few bucks and help keep me doing this job, keep me in the field. I just found out yesterday that I'm going to be spending the month of July in Israel reporting on this conflict. So I'll be back over there shortly, and we've got a lot of travel to do between now and then, but looking forward to getting back over there on the ground in the land. Now, uh, Song Stories Happy Hour says, question is all of the UN corrupt or is just this branch? No, I think all of the UN is corrupt. They're just globalists, leftists. And it's like we institutionalized some, communists and put them in power in the UN. Uh, Question: can the laser hit ground target like a tank? Well, it could hit it, but it's not going to destroy it. A tank's armor is far too thick for a laser to penetrate. At least not these lasers. These lasers can penetrate uh, aircraft, drones, uh, and missiles because by virtue of the fact that they are aerial delivery vehicles, they have to be very light and thin skinned. And so they're able to burn through those. Um, but they couldn't do that with a tank or probably even a truck or something like that. They could, I mean, we're getting into the Star Wars era here. I mean, we're going to, they're building smaller versions of this iron beam system now that they're deploying across the northern part of Israel that can shoot down drones. Uh, so they've managed to miniaturize it and make it reproducible. Okay, that you extrapolate that out, into the future, and what you can imagine is that they will come out with truck mounted lasers, and then they'll come out with shoulder mounted lasers, and then they'll come out with pistols. I mean, it's just going to get smaller and smaller as the technology progresses. And if that happens, they will be used against people. And now we're looking at Star Wars stuff here, which is pretty crazy. Okay, so I was looking to see here. We had more questions. Um, I saw another question about the UN go by. And Amy, you can pin any questions you see on here. Yeah, please go to chuckholton.com. And while we're at it, please go hit that like button, folks. Tells the YouTube algorithm more people need to see this content, and that's what we need. Good things. Uh, if UNICEF still operates in Gaza, is it not prerogative to see how children are consistently radicalized in schools. Well, UNICEF is not the one that was working in the schools so much as UNRWA. And UNRWA was the one running the schools, coming up with the curriculum that was radicalizing them. So they were hand in glove with Hamas in radicalizing children inside Gaza. And you ever wonder, like, how do they justify that? Well, if you talk to them, they say, look, we just want to educate these kids. We want them to learn to read. Hamas won't allow us to train them to read, the Bible. Hamas says they have to learn to read this stuff that's hateful against Israel. So that's what we teach them to read with. Then we're just working with what Hamas gives us, and they're in control of Gaza, so we have to. Well, the better thing would be to say, you get no education for your children if your only choice you're going to give us is to educate them to hate Israel. That would be the right answer. That would be the moral answer. Sorry, your children will not be educated because you're just teaching them to hate. Instead, their twisted morality says that no, teaching them to read, even if it's read the wrong stuff, is bad. I mean, is good. And the United States did this in Afghanistan. I saw it with my own eyes. The United States was spending $1 billion a week in Afghanistan, and a lot of that money was going to teach Afghans to read. Because when we invaded Afghanistan in 2001, the literacy rate was 17%. So we had this massive reading program all across the country. We're bringing especially the soldiers in, and we're training them to read. However, the Afghan government, being Islamic, required that the only thing they were allowed to read would be the Hadith and the Quran. And so I went into these schools, went into the classrooms and watched them learning to read, and watched these guys copying verses out of the Quran and the Hadith that specifically told them to go kill infidels. And then we wonder why we had this green on blue problem in Afghanistan, where Afghan soldiers that were being trained and paid by the United States were suddenly turning on their benefactors and murdering us. Well, I think, 2 plus 2 equals 4, folks. Are you going to work as a contractor? Denise asks. No, I'm not going to work as a contractor. I mentioned it yesterday or the day before. Maybe I should go sign up as a contractor. It might be the only way I could get into Gaza. It's not a bad idea, but I wouldn't be able to do the job that I'm supposed to be doing while I'm over there, which is standing in for the news director at CBN. So not in July, at least. Do you think Israel will accept the new ceasefire deal? Israel has made very clear its conditions for a ceasefire. And the new ceasefire deal, as far as I can tell, does not come anywhere close to meeting that. So let's just say, I hope not. Question: what effect would the Abraham Accords have on Hamas? Well, it would reduce other Arab countries' ability to support Hamas, because it's one of the stipulations of the Abraham Accords that they can't be supporting terror like that. Question: will Israel still occupy Gaza if they agree to this ceasefire? Uh, I don't. I don't think Israel is going to leave Gaza, and so that probably means they're not going to agree to this latest ceasefire proposal. Do you think Israel is going to accept that terrible deal without Witkoff offered? No, I don't think they are. My husband and I enjoy your channel. Thank you, Rebecca. What types of rescue help do the countries you go to? Red Cross, Catholic Church, Goodwill. Who do you see the most? That's a very good question, Rebecca. You see the Red Cross and Red Crescent pretty much everywhere. In some places, they're effective. In some places, they're worse than worthless. Gaza would be one of those places. You do see the United Nations virtually everywhere. I've almost never, ever in 22 years of doing this job, seen one place where the United Nations actually long term made this situation better. They almost always end up exacerbating the problem that they go there to address. Catholic charities are there. You do see Christians in every disaster and war zone, the Christian ministries that are there to help the people and, bring aid and medical support and things like that. Actually, it's one of the reasons why Cuba has lightened up on its persecution of the Christian church, is because when there's a hurricane or a flood or something in a communist Cuba, the government is responsible to go and help those people, and they're just terribly inefficient. So because of that, it takes them a couple of weeks or a couple of months to get to the affected area with any help. And by the time they get there, the Christians have already been there and helped the people, and the people don't really need the help anymore. So the government of Cuba realized that, hey, rather than persecuting these Christians, we should be encouraging these Christians because they do our job for us, which is a interesting turnabout, since in the United States, the government is trying to take work away from the church, things that are traditionally the church's responsibility, feeding the widows and orphans, the elderly, the infirm, helping people who need help. It's a perversion of charity for the government to have social welfare programs that help those people, because it is the church's responsibility to help people in need. And as a parallel structure to the government, it's much better when the church does it. It's much more effective. More of the aid gets to the people who need it. The overhead is much lower. There's much less graft and corruption. And it fosters a lot more goodwill and gratitude from the people who are being helped. And it makes it more likely that those people will then turn around and help somebody else. They've done studies on this, and they've found that the government helping people is the least efficient way to get help to people. It's most costly, most prone to abuse, and it actually reduces the gratitude of the people who get help when they get help from a government rather than from a charity or from a church. So it is the church's job. And it's interesting to see how Cuba is going the other way while the United States is trying to take more of that responsibility away from the church. They do that because the government is trying to consolidate power for itself. Jovan says common sense isn't very common. That's right. Common sense is all but a superpower at this point. I agree. So that's about all I've got for today, folks. I'm gonna end it there. I appreciate all of you, everybody that's watching. Thank you so much for being a part of the Hot Zone. Please make sure you're subscribed to this channel and go over to chuckholton.com. And like I say, the support we get at chuckholton.com goes into the programs that we use to support people and help people in the places that we go. So you get to directly help the people that you're seeing me report on. We've got these more than 100 women now that we're taking care of in Colombia, single mothers, refugees from Venezuela. We're keeping them out of prostitution. We're getting them started in jobs that will allow them to provide for themselves. And we're trying to move them along. And we're doing that with the funds that are donated through locals over there at chuckholton.com. So please go become a part of that. We're going to, you can feel good knowing that you're helping a lot of people that way. I mentioned many times we built a hospital last year. We paid for people to receive their sight, to get the surgery they needed to see again, and much, much more. We're doing all kinds of stuff around the globe. And that's all because of the generosity of people like you over at chuckholton.com. So not only do you get access to my documentaries and my books and things early, But you can feel good about yourself knowing that you're helping people. And Americans are by far the most generous people group on the planet. And there's one from England, just sent 19 pounds. Thank you, PC. I should include English people in that. You are very generous, PC, and I really am appreciative of you. Okay.